and let us all do we can to build a better future. All right, I got to talk about Chicago. There's some problems in Chicago that we need to address. But first, look, Peter Daou probably did the most tone-deaf tweet I ever saw. And look, I see what he's trying to do to help. I see it. But Peter, if you're going to bring up my city, Chicago's got its problems too. It does. And what Peter Daou decided to do was do like an Imagine thread. It's an interesting thread, and I can't show all of it because some of the imagery does show the brutality that took place with the Gaza strikes. But he said, destroying Chicago in self-defense. Now, I'm pretty sure a lot of people in the right wing probably heard that and says, oh, yeah, they don't like Chicago. Look, Chicago gets dragged through the mud on Fox News. We've all heard all the stories. And let's face it, Chicago, as a lifelong resident of this city, going back from generations from my great-grandfather, this city has its problems. It does. It does. But the thing is, Peter, you're not helping. You're not helping. You're not helping. Now, this is not the Chicago skyline. This is animated AI, artificial art. But imagine destroying Chicago in self-defense. Chicago and Gaza have roughly similar population sizes. Let's substitute Chicago for Gaza to describe the scale of events. Imagine in 1948, Chicago's residents are forced from their homes and subjected to brutal occupation. I'm going to level with you folks. We are kind of under an occupation of the democratic machine. It's a corporatist machine. It's a very complex history, especially in regards to how deep the corruption runs in my city. From dynastic families to unchecked political power to zero term limits, or either that, hey, son, take my seat. Okay, now you're the alderman. You think I'm joking? I'm not. Oh, no. We've had mayors rule the city for 20 plus years, father and son. If you haven't read the book, American Pharaoh, please do so. I recommend it to you wholeheartedly. Please read it. Because this city has its problems. He goes on to say, again, between 2008 and 2022, and again, substitute Chicago for Gaza, more than 6,000 Chicagoans are killed, mostly women and children, compared to the 300 occupiers. The occupiers also imprisoned thousands of Chicagoans, including kids, often without legal recourse. All right. This is going to be difficult, but you got to get ready for this one. Got to rip this Band-Aid off. Okay, let's talk about Chicago and the legal system. We have overcrowded prisons. We have hyper-segregation, not just segregation. Chicago is a hyper-segregated city done by the political establishment who've ruled over this city long before yours truly was even born. Chicago, being a city in which those in power control everything, also control the TIF funds. And because of the unchecked violence here, yes, people are losing their lives. This is a reality in this city, and it's difficult to see it. It's all too real, and our corrupt politicians do nothing. So, Peter, you're talking about substituting Gaza for Chicago. I see you're trying to help out, bring awareness to what's happening between Israel and Gaza, Israel and Palestine. However, you're not helping when you fail to realize that there are many cities across the United States, towns, that are struggling in their own right. Case in point, let's talk about clean drinking water here in Chicago. Something that Peter may not be aware of, but should be. Chicago left out of EPA's new lead action plan. This is an hour ago. For those who don't know, or may have forgotten, Flint, Michigan does not have clean drinking water because they have lead and other contaminants in its drinking water. Chicago has lead in its drinking water. And yes, Hardlands Media did not one, but two documentary videos talking about the pollution going into Lake Michigan. So it's not only lead, but also dangerous toxic waste, regulated toxic waste. Dilution is the solution, and it goes into Lake Michigan. So, yes, all the outlying cities and towns that are near Lake Michigan and take water from Lake Michigan are also exposing their population to some of those dangerous materials. So let's go deeper into it. New federal rules aimed at getting lead out of the nation's water could vastly improve water safely in most of the country, but not in Chicago. So we're SHITE, shite out of luck. What's happening? Health advocates have been pushing for a rule that would shorten Chicago's timeline to remove 400,000 toxic lead water lines to just 10 years. For those you don't know, if you are a property owner, small business owner, homeowner in Chicago, and it's found out you got lead in your drinking water or a lead pipe connecting into your house, the city doesn't remove it. You have to do it. You have to pay for it. You're the one that has to pay out of pocket. So we don't have clean drinking water. The Environmental Protection Agency's new proposal shortens the timeline within the next decade for most U.S. cities, but gives Chicago 40 to 50 years to address its lead lines. Not much different from the city's current situation. My God, what the hell? Why it matters. Health authorities say no level ingested of lead is safe. That's right. And in a 2022 Axios analysis found that more than a third of Chicago homes tested show high levels of lead in their water. By the numbers, over the last 3 years, Chicago has removed only about 3,800 lines. So that means all these years, these generations, people, family members have been exposed to lead. 40 years means that at least 2 more generations of children will continue to be exposed to the risk of drinking contaminated water and bearing the health and behavioral consequences of it. Brilliant job. Peter, please stop using my city as a reference. But let's also talk about free speech and politics here in Chicago. Chicago has a nickname being the Windy City. Yes, it can be windy, but it's mostly because of its politics. Because now our fantastic mayor, Mayor Brandon Johnson, Chicago City Council is tightening public access amid a slew of chaotic meetings. I read this article. I even read the article in the Tribune. What the mayor is doing is preventing regular citizens, voting citizens, active citizens, from being in the city council and being regulated to the upper floor where a glass window was at. So this area right here, see where the arrow's at? They're just going to be pushing people up here. That way the regular folk aren't with our fantastic politicians. On a Tuesday morning in early November, Antonio Gutierrez ventured to City Hall despite a warning from fellow community organizers that recent council meetings have been scary. Well, who cares? They hadn't been to one in a few years, but Gutierrez felt they had to go voice their support for Chicago's sanctuary city ordinance. For decades, it has helped protect undocumented immigrants like Gutierrez, but 2 older people are pushing to ask voters whether it should be repealed. As Gutierrez sat down in the chamber second floor public gallery that morning, the warning from their cohorts rang true. I noticed right away that it wasn't the space for dialogue. It was really chaotic space. It was scary. And the November 7th committee meeting was one in a series this year where unruly attendees have interrupted the council's business by shouting at one another and at council members, making floor speeches. Some of those agitators have become fixtures at nearly every meeting, at times using offensive language to express opposition to the ongoing influx of migrants. And if you haven't been paying attention, especially to what's happening in major metropolitan cities like New York City or Chicago, many of the residences in these neighborhoods do not want these shelters to be put up in their districts. And there's a lot of pushback in Chicago. As I've mentioned before, Chicago is a hyper-segregated city. It's got a lot of problems, especially on the north and especially on the south and west side neighborhoods, where there's not only environmental racism, but there's also lack of public schools, investment into the infrastructure, and yes, lead in our drinking water. So there's a lot of issues impacting a lot of citizens that live in this city. It gets worse, folks. Continuing on. The topics of which have been spanned funding for the migrant influx to Israel's war on Gaza to a slew of progressive policy proposals from Mayor Brandon Johnson have worn on the patience and energy of the city council and called into question the safety of older persons and their staff. I get it. I understand it. But in this day and age, when you have to remove the people from the city council in which they cannot participate, well, what else are you willing to do? What else are you willing to do? Again, Peter, talking about issues and people occupying Chicago. Well, yes, there is an occupying force here. It's called the Chicago Democratic Machine. And it's not pretty. It's going to get worse. Now, again, pushing forward, over the past 6 months, some alderpersons say they've also received email threats. One has been accosted at a public event, and the city has had to, on more than one occasion, clear council chambers. Now, the team in charge of security for city council says it's instituting new rules in an effort to keep meetings in order, including limited access to the city council's second floor. There have been times where things have gotten or seem to have gotten out of hand, said Rich Guidance. Mayor Brandon Johnson's chief of staff recently told WEZ, I would just say that there's a lot of continuous situations that are taking place in our city at this time, and we're trying to balance it with the First Amendment privileges and rights. However, let's talk about this because people are upset. This is from Block Club Chicago. Bryant Park tent encampment deemed safe despite mercury, arsenic, contamination, mayor's office says. So this little camp here is being built on the south side of Chicago in Brighton Park over an industrial site where there is levels of arsenic, mercury, and other dangerous material. It's similar to lead. There's no such thing as a safe amount of mercury or arsenic or lead or any other dangerous contaminant. And yet, they're building this camp in a community that's been very vocal about not having it there. And also, they're trying to raise the alarm bells by saying, hey, this is a toxic site. How do the residents know it? Because they've been living with it for years. Just like there's lead in our drinking water. Peter, listen, don't use my city as an example anymore. There's a lot of problems in Chicago, but there's a lot of problems across the country because we have a government and an establishment and a corporate media that maybe occasionally, once in a while, a blip on the radar will talk about the issues impacting our communities, but they never follow through with it, and they hope the story will somehow disappear in the ether. There's a lot of problems here in this city. High levels of mercury and other dangerous contaminants were found on the vacant Brighton Park lot, slated to house up to 2,000 asylum seekers. 2,000 people. When we covered all these protests way back from 2017 to 2018, when people were saying that Chicago needs to be a sanctuary city, I remember myself and Daniel asking a lot of these activists and organizers after the protests, like, hey, is there a way to really provide for all these people? Are we truly prepared? And they always gave us some half-ass answer. And look, I feel sorry for a lot of these people coming here, but they're being used as pawns. And the whole term of sanctuary cities is nothing more than a way for people to feel good about themselves when they talk about Donald Trump. It's all just to make themselves look better in comparison to the Donald Trump, the woogie boogie boogie scary man. There was no plan for these people. And now they're building the camp during winter. They could have done this before, but before then, they were in front of police stations or at O'Hare Airport. And I even covered on the show about how migrants are leaving Chicago because there's nothing here for them. The city was never prepared. And by building a camp, now the residents are upset. And we're going to hear more about people being upset. I said before in this segment that Chicago is a hyper-segregated city. It's unfortunate. It's devastating. It's a sad chapter in our city's history. But if you look at especially how the South and West Side neighborhoods have been screwed over in regards to gentrification, public schools being shut down, mental health facilities being shut down, people are angry. And of course, they're going to be vocal at the politicians who want to use the migrants as their little political tool to make themselves look better against Trump, but also try and win over the progressive base. But the sad truth is, here in Chicago, it is expensive to live in the city. The city has violence. The city has unchecked corruption. So when Peter Daou says, imagine Chicago being Gaza, well, look, horrible choice. Don't use a city that has its own problems for you to maybe help out, Peter, because you're not helping out at all. I want to pull up this video here and actually talk further about how residents are upset. So let's go ahead and play it.
Well, tonight on the podcast, ladies and gentlemen, there was a press conference at Chicago City Hall. And there was, two speakers. Of course, Sister Kata Truss, she'll be speaking there, and his other brother, I think his name Mark or so. But I want to kind of break down a little bit what they're saying, because I'm glad that we are in the time period that the code is the leader and not an individual. See, one thing the Democrats and also the other white supremacists love is when we anoint a black leader. Because see, when you anoint a black leader and everybody is running through this one leader or leaders, right? They can be easily corrupted, or they could, take them out literally like we're having Fred Hampton, put him in jail, whatever the case. And then now the particular, headway is scattered now because the shepherd was struck. So when you have the code being the leader, just like white supremacy, they don't have the white leader. They had white supremacy is the leader. White supremacy is the code. So you can't say, where's the white leader at? Where's the white comedian that's your leader? Where's the white rock star that's your leader? Like in the black community, they try to anoint leaders for us and say, oh, this black rapper, he's your leader, or the black comedian's your leader, right? Even Malcolm X talked about that. And we're the only community where basically some entertainer is talking about they trying to be your leader. But this happens in no other community but the black one. But delineation is something that's really has been very, very positive for the black community because of what we have seen happen when they try to play this minority, people of color, etc. So let me go to the first brother. Let's go ahead and listen to him, and then we'll, follow up and just kind of expound on some things the brother's saying. Let's go ahead and roll that.
Now, this video here you're going to see, this was shared with me by other people who follow Hard Lens Media. And when I say that there is a rage happening in the city and that people are yelling at these politicians and these aldermen are upset, and now the mayor and the city council want to prevent people from being on the second floor by voicing out their opinions, people have a right to be angry in this city. All right. Public schools are being shut down. We have lead in our drinking water, unchecked corruption, police brutality, violence in our streets. We have a slew of issues. Plus, it's pretty expensive to live in Chicago. All right. And these politicians, for a long time, have allowed this madness to happen. And now you have these migrants here, and people are upset, especially in the South and West Side neighborhoods, where all of a sudden we're seeing a lot of benefits happening to these migrants. And I'm sorry about their situation. However, they're being used as political tools, as pawns, and the city government has yet to lift a finger to help out the people. The Johnson administration is turning out to be just as ineffective as Lightfoot's, as Emanuel's, going on infinitum. They don't care about the people of Chicago. So Peter Daou, your help, or maybe trying to define Chicago, it's a comparison of how you helped out Dr. Cornel West. You did nothing. All right, you're not helping out anybody because Chicago has its problems. You say there's occupation, or imagine occupation here in Chicago. Well, yeah, it's something we know all too well. My family's known it for generations with unchecked corruption and politicians that don't give a damn. Where schools are being shut down, where homeowners are struggling to make ends meet, small businesses being shut down, and our infrastructure is crumbling. Way to help out, Peter.
You're going to have the same office for us.
That's right.
You don't hear any other community talking this plural talk.
That's right.
They strictly speak for themselves.
You got to.
The Chinese in Chinatown speak for Chinese, right?
That's right.
The Greeks in Greek town speak for Greeks. The Hispanics in Little Village speak for Hispanics.
That's right.
Rightfully so. And black people speak for black people.
Oh, yes, sir.
Black Americans.
Yes, sir.
We're not African American. We're not people of color. We're not black and brown, minority.
That's right.
BIPOC, none of that. People, no, none of that. This is about our people demanding the resources, just as you're giving these people, these newcomers who are walking into this country.
That's right. You're right.
And sister's correct. How do you take a new group of people that have paid no taxes, can't vote, and you put them in front of the voters?
I'm not going to pay them no damn taxes.
And so we say this to you, Mayor, Governor, President. If you think that they're that powerful that you have to acquiesce and answer to them over us, then you tell them to vote for you in these next elections.
That's
You
right.
tell them to support your Democratic National Convention. And we're going to show you how we feel about the Democratic National Convention.
Turn it up.
Thank you.
If you think you're going to have a peaceful Democratic National Convention in the city of Chicago while our people are starving,
That's right.
stay tuned.
Of course, shout out.
Now, I want to stop here because guess what? The DNC is coming here to Chicago. Yes, I'm going to cover it. I feel obligated to do so. That's going to happen. And I got to tell you, he's not the only. There's a lot of groups upset at the city government, at the Democratic Party here in Chicago. And I have a feeling in my gut that there is a chance that there's going to be people who are going to be protesting and being vocal at the DNC convention. It won't be peaceful and rainbows and sunshines because, as I've covered on other stories here for Hard Lens Media, as I've given commentary here on this show, voters across the spectrum are leaving the Democratic Party. And here in Chicago, we have the Democratic machine that has run unchecked for years. It is a corporate monolith. It's a machine that has been running over this city for years, and people have been subjected to it. And of course, there's going to be people who are upset on how the city government has been leading us. Things haven't gotten better. Peter, listen, I know you want to help out, but you know, I would say to anyone, don't take his help. All right. Look at the Marianne Williamson campaign. Look at the Dr. Cornel West campaign. The complete epic disasters, both of them. Simple as that. Now Peter wants to weigh in for the thing in Gaza. Never mention my city again. Keep it out of your mouth, Peter, because Chicago has its problems, just like New York City has its problems, just like any small town in America has its problems. Americans in general have problems. So if you're ever going to reference my city again, maybe kind of do the research and look into it, because there's some problems here in this city, and it's a powder keg ready to blow because people are upset. Chicago's history is brutal and dark. Now, I like to think that there's a lot of good people here in this city and that there's a chance for this city to turn itself around. I want to hold on to that hope, but hope is the first pass of disappointment. But when you see somebody try and bring an example of one situation and use another location as an example for that, chances are they haven't done their research into said location. Chicago has its problems. And that's something that Peter Daou, I guess, isn't fully aware of. What else is he going to help out next time? Hey, let's have democracy in the chat. Do you want Peter Daou to help you out with your next project? Type 1 for yes, Kit. Come on. I want Peter Daou to help me. Help me run my next election. It'll be great. Type 2, hell no. That guy's track record is terrible. What's wrong with you? Type in the comment section below.